And we are live. Welcome everyone to the first Horror Writers Association Google Hangout. And we are here live with some of our young adult authors. We're going to be discussing the young adult genre today and the field, and hopefully hear a little bit from these folks. So let's go through the different folks that are on with us today. We'll have an introduction. Jake, do you want to start first, and then we'll go to Joe, then Patrick, then Peter?
Can I just point out the Bill Nolan photobomb there in the background?
You can't point out the Bill Nolan photobomb. Yes, that did occur. All right. So, Jake, give us a little introduction.
Jake Bible. I am the author of the novel, teen horror novel Intentional Haunting, which is nominated for Bram Stoker this year. Other YA stuff I have Little Dead Man, Zombie Apocalypse, novel with conjoined twins, one alive, one dead. And then I actually have a middle grade sci-fi horror series coming out later this year. I think Goosebumps in Space, basically. And then tons of adult horror, zombie, thriller, adventure, sci-fi, mashup stuff. About 17 novels published right now, with plenty more coming. That's pretty much it for me. Other than I live in Nashville.
Thanks, Jake. Joe, go ahead.
Okay. Hi, I'm Joe McKinney. I am the author of Dog Days was my won the last year's Stoker for the YA fiction, and I've done a bunch of zombie stuff, a bunch of crime books, a little bit of science fiction, and let's see here. Yeah, I guess my zombie books were written for adults, but they seem to have a YA following that's pretty cool. So kind of new to YA. I had good luck with Dog Days, doing a lot more of that here coming up pretty soon. About to start my first full-length YA novel that should be pretty exciting. And yeah, so that's about it for me. I live in San Antonio, Texas. My day job, I'm a San Antonio police sergeant. Done a little bit of everything there. I've been a homicide detective, disaster mitigation specialist, a few other things. So that's me. Looking forward to talking to you guys.
I guess I'm next. Hi, I'm Patrick Freewald. I live in New York State, in the middle of nowhere, not the New York most people think of. There are no skyscrapers. As I look out my window, I currently see snow and trees, and that is all. I had the honor of being beaten by Joe McKinney in the Bram Stoker Award, the young adult category last year. I'm sort of an unintentional young adult author. I'm a high school teacher, and my first published novel is called Twice Shy. The second, Special Dead, was nominated last year for the Bram Stoker Award, and it was intended to be satire for adults. Like I said, I'm a teacher. I think that teenagers are hilarious, only occasionally on purpose. And that was sort of the theme for the stories, where it was supposed to be very, very tongue-in-cheek, and has gained a pretty nice sort of unintentional young adult following. So I found myself an unintentional young adult author. So that's me.
All right, that leaves me. I'm Peter Adam Solomon. My novel, All Those Broken Angels, is nominated for the Bram Stoker this year in young adult novels. It's my second young adult novel. My first one, Henry Franks, was a few years ago. And I have been writing for a long time and only discovered the ability to get published when I started writing for young adults. So I'm going to continue doing so as long as they continue to read it.
Awesome. Thank you, Peter. Thank you, guys. Tanya Hurley, I think, is trying to join. She's Q&A'ing over here. If there are any other guests that are supposed to be on the video call, you should see a private invite on the Horror Writers page itself, on the Google page. Also, I sent it in email to your email account, so you should see that somewhere or another. If you don't, private message me on Facebook or on Google, or email me, and I will try and help you as best I can while doing this at the same time. So I'm sorry if we you didn't get in on the 30-minute trial. So let's move on. I'm going to go ahead and test here. We are starting to get some Q&As, so I'm going to go ahead and take the first one here, which is this starting soon? And yes, it has started. Thank you for your question. And it is always going to be Pacific time. In the future, these Hangouts will always be on the second Sunday of the month at 4 p.m. Pacific time. Okay, so that's going to be a regular feature. We'll have different topics each month. So thank you for that question, Michelle Thornton. Moving on, I would like to go ahead and see. It looks like someone tried to join, but I'm not sure what happened there. Let's move on here. We have another question from K.L. Napier, and this is a very good question. And she's asking, I'm a YA writer myself. This is my first endeavor, and I'm wondering how the roundtable members each define YA. So, anyone want to take a shot at that first?
Well,
Sure.
I'll give it oh, okay.
Go ahead, Joe.
Okay, thank you. You know, I have a pretty inclusive definition of YA, pretty inclusive definition of horror as well, but of YA, I think, you know, I've heard that it has to have a youthful protagonist, you know, a character, the main character who's, you know, of that right age for the readership, but I don't even know if that's necessarily true. I think that really the only definition you need for YA fiction is fiction that is of interest to young adults. And if a young adult reads it and enjoys it, I mean, you know, for me, that's good enough.
Yeah, I'm close to that.
I know that for me, when I was... Go for it, Patrick.
Okay, I'm close to that definition too. I think it's very common to have a young adult protagonist. It's very common to have some sort of coming of age or identity themed story in some manner. But other than that, it's I've found that if it does have a young adult protagonist, it's probably going to be YA, even if you didn't mean it to be. I mean, if you look at the Hunger Games, essentially, battle royale with you know, a bunch of kids murdering each other on an island, and yet somehow it's a fantastically popular young adult series. So I think in terms of theme and content, it can be all over the map in terms of YA. And I pretty much agree with Joe that if young adult readers are reading it, then it's probably to some degree YA. I think it's more defined by what you can't do than what you can. I think extremes in terms of language, violence, and sex will tend to shunt it more towards adult than young adult. But other than that, I think it's pretty wide open as to what qualifies. Thanks, Peter. Your turn.
Yeah, the only thing I'd add is that, you know, we were all young once, and when we were young adults and that teenage readers, we were reading adult novels. There were no young adult novels, so it's not the age of the protagonist that makes it a YA. It's readers enjoy what we're writing, and again, it's definitely more than you throw a 15-year-old, you've got a YA, because you can have a 15-year-old protagonist in an adult novel. So it's not the age that sets it.
Yeah, because we always get, I forget what age, Patrick, maybe you can help us out with this, but, you know, in school they gave us, you know, Lord of the Flies, and they gave us Catcher in the Rye, you know, both of which have young protagonists, but I would say definitely not YA fiction. But yeah, we get those, in early high school, like sophomore year in high school, something like that?
Yeah, it varies a bit. I know at the school I teach in, the English department typically, I mean, I teach physics and robotics, so, but in the English department, those are, I believe, junior and senior level, depending on whether or not you're taking AP or honors courses or whatever. But that's mid-late high school. I agree that those are not really young adult books, even though they do have young adult protagonists to them.
Yeah, I think so much of it ends up being decided also, depending on the publisher, by the marketing department, where they think they can put it. I mean, really, because I actually have had, Little Dead Man, my publisher, I wrote it as YA. I wrote it with, teens and kids in mind, specifically keeping out graphic sex and, graphic language, which in my adult books, there's plenty of graphic language and all that. I mean, I designed it this way, but they decided to put it in more of a, in the, sci-fi / horror section, just because they thought it would be, fit better in the zombie genre, and that was more of an adult thing. Also, YA, it really is. There's so many different categories out there right now. I mean, and different authors doing different things. You've got someone like Chuck Wendig with his, which had plenty of language. He doesn't shy from that at all, and yet he's got a couple series that are considered, YA there. Whereas you would have some parents that would totally back off from that. And then I've got a middle grade series coming out, and that's easier to define. That's 8 to 12-year-olds, and that is almost defined more by librarians in schools. So it's almost like, which group are you talking to before, with who's going to define what exactly is YA? It's all over the board right now.
You have to be careful with those librarians. At our local school, we had Game of Thrones was put in YA because of the Stark children and a librarian who hadn't read them yet. And saw that. I was like, are you sure you want to do that? And she said, what? And I gave her the premise of what kicks off the war, and she said, oh, maybe not.
Yeah, it's also, I mean, graphic novels are a good thing. There's a lot that are definitely YA appropriate, but a lot that are not. I mean, and they'll even have little disclaimers for mature readers down at the bottom. But so many libraries put them in the YA fiction section because they're quote-unquote comic books and all that. And it's like, 2 pages in, and you got naked and blood and cursing and everything. It's like, obviously someone has not vetted these at all, but they have a concept in their head of what this category is, so they put it there. It's it's interesting.
Yeah. Plus the YA category has changed so much. I know that I wrote a book in the 90s that was an adult-only book, and I received lots of feedback from publishing houses saying that it was marketplace. And fast forward 15 years, and you find the same storyline in YA fiction. Mm-hmm. And every year, what constitutes YA gets more extreme. And I've talked to elementary school classes and junior high classes, and they'll ask me, are we old enough to read your novels? And my answer was always, your parents should read it first and decide whether you're mature enough to read the book. And then they'd ask me, so which Saw movie was your favorite?
Exactly, right.
So the audience is catching up to really quickly.
Well, you can tell that the publishing business of YA is growing more complex because we're starting to see more carefully divided focus on middle grade YA. Separating those two out. You have children's. Previously, I think when most of us grew up, there were just children's books. And that's pretty much it. But now, we have YA, we have middle grade. I can see the publishing side of it growing a little bit more complex and more differentiated as more and more YA fiction enters the market.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I think parents are really looking for that kind of clarity too, because there's a huge difference between the Chronicles of Narnia and A Wrinkle in Time, and then you start to get a little bit more towards what I would call modern YA, like with the Divergent series. And then the Rotten Ruin series is there's a lot of death in that series. Mm-hmm. Great series. Gotta give a shout out to Jonathan Mayberry there. But then The Hunger Games is it's a horrifically violent series, and yet it's very typical YA fare now. Forgive me, I don't remember the name of them, but a bunch of my students have been reading a series of YA books that they're all about drug use, and they're huge. They're these really thick books. I don't remember what they're called, but there's 3 or 4 of them in the series, and they're just catastrophically horrific, like real life people, their lives destroyed by getting into the drug scene, and yet they're classified as YA. So, I don't know.
Train Spotting, the YA version. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, something like that.
All right. We have another question. I'm going to bring that one up. Hold on a second. Another question from KL Napier. Do you have young adults as beta readers? And if not, how do you keep in touch with the young adult voice in your books? Or do you consider that even necessary?
Oh, God, yeah, it's totally necessary. If you're not in touch with that voice, that it'll come across in your writing, and kids will have no interest in reading it. For me, I don't have any YA beta readers, but I do have 12 and 10-year-old daughters, and I bounce ideas off them all the time, and which is good, because the 12-year-old is a voracious reader, and every once in a while I'll toss out an idea, and she's like, "Oh, you can't do that, Dad, because so and so just published a series that has that in there." And so, okay, great. Well, I'm glad I have you around. So yeah, that's I think for me that's both the way I stay current, but also my main motivation for wanting to start writing YA stuff, is to have some stuff that's of interest to my children.
Yeah, that's interesting. I have to specifically avoid YA readers because I'm a school teacher in one school district. I'm on the school board in another district. What am I going to do? Go to these kids and say, "Here, read this horror novel." And if it turns out to be something that someone objects to, I could see myself getting into a lot of trouble that way. So I agree with Joe. It's critical to have that appropriate voice. I think one of the biggest compliments I got about Twice Shy and Special Dead was how authentic the teenagers came across in those books, and I take that as a very big compliment, and I'm very happy to have gotten that compliment. I think it just comes from trying to make your characters as genuine as possible, regardless of what age they are. But if you try and really fake it without understanding it, I think they'll catch on, and I don't think you're going to end up with a great YA audience that way. But in terms of beta readers, it's very hard to go to people who are minors and say, "Hey, read this book before it gets published or anything else, and let me know what you think, etc." It seems, unless they're my nieces and nephews or something, I don't see that as a necessarily a wise idea. When specifically you're talking about young adult horror, young adult fantasy or something, I could certainly see that. But as soon as you start getting into things that might cross over into horror, that could get a little fun in all the wrong ways.
Yeah, I think I just put myself. I remember a lot of what it was like being a kid and being a teenager. And when I'm writing, I really just kind of put myself back in that head. For me, I think it's easier to write YA horror than maybe some of the other ones, like YA sci-fi or that, because as a child and as a teen, there's a lot of insecurity and a lot of fear and a lot of anxiety that just naturally comes from not understanding the world. So you can actually channel a lot of that old fear that maybe you felt as a kid into the story. As for keeping it current, I have a 12-year-old daughter and a 16-year-old son. So when I feel like maybe I'm sounding a little too early 80s, I think of how they talk, and I change the dialogue up. But really, it's a timeless thing of how kids have felt throughout. You still always have that fear and insecurity of not knowing how the bigger, greater world works. So it's I don't want to say it's easy, but you can put yourself there. And then just, with the minutia, I just think of, okay, is my kid going to laugh at this or actually be scared? And if I think, oh, no, they're going to go, Dad, seriously, really? Did you? No. And, then I change it up. And I don't actually have them beta read. My son doesn't like horror as much. He's the voracious reader. My daughter loves horror, but she takes forever to read. So it's like this weird, trade-off there. So I just try and put myself to where I was as a kid, and also think of what they would think would work as kids now, and it seems to work for me.
It helps to have been well bullied.
That's tons of adorbs.
I know for me, I've always told people that that I'm basically an emotionally stunted 16-year-old boy still, and so I tap into that, like Jake was saying. And the other thing is, I mentor a number of teenage writers, and I wouldn't give them my stuff to beta read, but as I read their stuff, it keeps me current and it keeps me more in tune with contemporary teenagers. Plus, I've got teenagers, so that helps.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's sort of like if you remember the movie As Good as It Gets, when the girl asks Jack Nicholson's character, "How do you write women so well?" And I take a man and I remove reason and accountability. It's sort of writing teenagers can kind of be the same way. We all remember being teenagers, and so you can take your own experiences and say, well, when I was a little less wise and had a little less perspective, then ... and there you go. That can help, right? It won't necessarily get you all the way there, but it can get you part of the way there.
All right. Well, we have another question coming up. Good job, audience. I'm going to go to Michelle Thornton here. She's got a question. She says, I'm pitching a YA horror novel right now. Any thoughts on how you all found your agents? I'm researching and pitching any agents who rep horror or ghost stories. I'm involved with SCBWI. Are there industry events that actual horror agents attend?
I don't know if there are actually any horror agents. I think most agents out there are going to pick from as many gardens as they can to try to come up with a bumper crop. So my agent, for instance, I'm one of his only fiction clients. Pretty much everything else he does is history and sports and current affairs. I got totally lucky with mine. My agent, my first book was a zombie novel called Dead City, and when I sent it out, I sent it out to a couple publishers, knew absolutely nothing about the publishing industry. So I sent it out to a couple publishers, and I got polite rejections back. And then sent it to an agent thinking, okay, well, I need an agent. So I sent it out to 2 or 3 agents. I can't remember exactly how many, but not a big group. My agent had stayed up all night long the night before, drinking beer with his buddies and watching all of the Night of the Living Dead series. And so when he came to work, hungover and not quite sure he was going to stay the whole day, he opened up my manuscript was the first one on the table, and he looked at it and, oh, a zombie novel. Gosh, please don't suck. And so he ended up taking it and ended up selling it to one of the publishers who had rejected it just a couple of months earlier. So for me, it was just being in the right place at the right time. But
yeah, I actually had Little Dead Man written, and it got me an agent, and I just queried a bunch of agents. And ended up getting one based on that YA novel, and we couldn't sell it anywhere. And then with Intentional Haunting, that was my second one that YA novel I wrote, and she couldn't sell that one either. And then my career changed a little. I started cranking out a lot more pulpy horror, zombie stuff, and adult fare. Ended up walking away from my agent very amicable. It was, all worked out, but then packaged those 2 novels and a pitch for a middle grade series and sold it to a publisher myself. So I went the traditional route, got an agent, couldn't sell them. When, I finally, didn't have an agent, I ended up selling it all, myself that way. So the road of writing your novel, trying to find a horror YA agent may not necessarily be the road to success. In that vein, you just never know. Everybody's it really is circumstance. Like Joe said, I bet if his agent hadn't stayed up all night watching the Night of the Living Dead series and all those, he may not have gotten noticed that next morning by that. So there is so much luck or just circumstance and happenstance that goes into it. The key is never quitting. You just keep pushing forward.
Yeah, I had 109 rejection leave, not that I'm counting, for Twice Shy. And ultimately, I submitted to the Journal Stone Horror Fiction Contest, and I ended up winning that contest. And it came with an advance and a publishing deal, and went from there. I had an agent for an entirely different novel for a little while, and he was not a good agent. Getting an agent is a great step as long as they're a good agent, and it's kind of hard to tell sometimes who is and isn't a good agent. I don't know that there's a secret here. I think that you write the best book you can, you query people, you ask, and you query them, and if you find the right agent at the right time and they love the work and they think they can sell it, because this is their job. I mean, they do it because they love books, but they also do it because they love to eat and pay their rent. And if they feel that they can sell the book, then they're going to sell the book, or then they're going to accept the book and go with it. And if they don't think that they can sell the book, then they're going to pass, even if they love it. And that is that's the facts of life. Writing's a passion, publishing is a business, and I don't know that there's a great secret. Being in the right place at the right time helps. I mean, I have an in right now with a guy who's he's a big name at a big and I met him at a con when he was setting up tables in the booth next to mine, because he happened to have family nearby, and so he was just setting it up, and he gave me his card and said, hey, send me your next manuscript. And so I'm going to be doing that this summer. Will it go anywhere? I don't know, but that was he's like the guy who the editors have to get approval from after they've accepted stuff from agents. And so I kind of have an in with him just because I happened to have a booth at this little con in central New York where the person next to me was a former B-movie act who he was helping set up her tables, and he saw books, and he's like, ooh, neat books. And so those kinds of connections happen quite a bit, and it's, I hate to say it's a crapshoot, but it's a crapshoot.
Yeah, I'd just like to add that as far as industry events go, it's a good idea to go to the World Horror Convention, of course, which the next one is coming up in Atlanta in May. And you can go to horror.org and see links there to World Horror Convention 2015. Another professional convention that a lot of our industry attends is World Fantasy Convention. So those are two that I would recommend for networking with professionals, agents, publishers, other authors, etc.
To the person who asked the question, as Patrick mentioned, you can, and Sonny mentioned, you can pick up contacts all over the place, especially at events like World Horror. But if you make a contact, definitely follow up on it. Don't let the grass grow under your feet. Get on it. Because if you wait 2.5 years and, hey, remember I met you at the bar at Applebee's, whatever, people are gonna be like, no, what are you talking about? So yeah, definitely follow up on that stuff.
Yeah, I want to stress that too. When I went to my first World Horror Con a couple of years ago, I was a little surprised at how small it was, and then at the same time, I realized that it wasn't small in terms of the caliber and the connections and everything else of the people there. It was an incredible experience. My first impression was a little negative, and then my final impression by the time I was done was extremely positive, and it's done wonders for me and specifically for my writing career to go to these cons and meet people. And not meet people because they can help me get ahead, but meet people because these are cool people who are doing similar things to what I do, and they share similar passions, and through those connections, it opens up an enormous number of opportunities. Yeah, okay, so I'll go back to it's a crapshoot, but you know what? At the same time, the more people you know, the more successful you can be in that crapshoot. The more people who are paying attention to what you're doing and are interested in seeing you succeed. This is an extremely helpful group of people. I mean, they're in every industry you get a little backbiting and snippiness and things like that. And to be honest, I see very little of that in the horror community. People want to see each other succeed. They want to help each other out, and they celebrate each other's successes. So the more people you know, and the more people who know you, the stronger a chance you're going to have to be able to make the right connection at the right time with that agent or publisher or whoever that happens to be.
Thanks, Patrick. So we have another question. The questions keep flowing. Thank you. K.L. Napier has another question here. Regardless of YA or adult or even genre, what marketing tools or techniques have proven most successful for each of you regarding gaining readership and or sales? After all, most of us have to self-promote these days. We're all pretty aware of that, I think. So who wants to take that one first?
I don't think anyone is really confident that what they're doing is successful. I think it's, again, to go back to Patrick's words, I think it's a crapshoot. I think we all try different things at different times, whether it's blogging or tweeting or Facebook or personal appearances or readings and signings. There are as many different ways to market your book as there are to find an agent, and it's one of those things where I know personally I've tried a number of different things, and what works one week won't work the next week. And so it is, for me, it has been a constant struggle of what is going to work this time. And whenever I try something the second time, it will never work as well. And when I'll share those ideas with someone, it won't work as well for them. And then they'll give me an idea, but it won't work as well for me. So it's learning your own personal strengths. I know people who get up in front of a crowd and are energetic and energized and get everyone screaming, and they're a rock star on stage. And I know people who stand there kind of introverted and afraid of the audience. So as long as you know what your strengths are and play to those strengths, for me, I'm a writer, so I tend to lean towards the safety of things like Twitter or blogging that I can write. But if your strength is the spoken word, or you're more used to it, then I would suggest sticking with what you're best at and finding what works for you, because what works for me might not work for you.
If I can follow up on that, talking about what sometimes works and sometimes doesn't. I was at a con recently. I was there for 2 days, and I sold 2 books. That's not very successful. Yet that was in January. In September, I went to a con. I was there for 3 days, and I sold over 100 books. And the cons were of similar size and of similar audience. I don't think I was like terrifically hungover or something at the second con, especially since I hadn't been drinking. And so I don't know why one was so successful and the other wasn't. It was similar cons, similar ideas, similar everything, and one was fantastically successful and the other was a complete crash. It was a total waste of my time. And the only bright side of that second con is that the organizers felt so bad for how I did that they comped my table. That's not really something you call a success, but it was. And yet this other con, I'm going to go back there in September because it was amazing and I did tremendously well. At the same time, I might show up there and sell 2 books. I don't know. So it's very weird. I mean, Peter's right. You've got Facebook and Twitter and things like that. I think being genuine will get you much, much farther than being a salesperson. There's far too many people who have realized that getting published is the art and getting read is much, much harder. and there's this some people you can smell the desperation coming off of them from the way they behave on social media and things like that, as opposed to being genuine people. They're salesmen and they're trying to push their stuff all the time, and I think that's something that you can avoid and you can balance trying to sell versus just being a genuine person. But if you join a social media site and the only thing you're there for is to shill, then you're going to come across as a shill. And other than that, I mean, I'm kind of with Peter. I don't know. I can't tell you what works. I can tell you some things that have worked in the past and then haven't worked again and then work again. And that is the secret. Nobody really knows exactly why some books take off and some don't. And even the big publishers don't necessarily know why that happens. And so you write the best thing you can, you put it out there, and then you see what works for you.
Yeah,
Patrick, I have a question for you.
Go ahead.
Patrick, I have a question for you about what you just said, which is, at those two cons, the one in September and the one in January, where you sold over 100 and then 2 books, how did the people around you sell? Were they also selling books when you were?
No, in
Because
both cases,
they couldn't feet away from you.
yeah, in both cases, the general sales for the people around me were similar, but I was the only author there in both cases too. So I can't really say that other people were and weren't selling books, because there was a limited supply of authors in that case.
Yeah, and there's also
Sorry, Jake.
yeah, there's an old adage: the best marketing for your book is writing your next one. And you hear these kinds of things as a writer of all these different sayings that so many writers who've been successful throw out there, and you're never sure which one quite works. So I asked my publisher, one of my publishers, I'm like, what do you want me to do for marketing? What do you need me to do? What do you need me to set up? What do let's get a plan together. And seriously, I do not kid you, the email response was one sentence: write the next book. That was it. Not even a bye, see ya, chat later. Write the next book, and that was it. And honestly, I mean, that's where I found my success, is writing the next book, getting it to them, and just keep going with that. We're in that age where people are binging everything. Media especially, they're binging. TV. I mean, we're in the Netflix age. Readers, if they like you, and that's the key. I think this all should be couched with write well. we have to say, I mean, you have to have a good product, you have to have an entertaining product, you have to have something that people want to read and is readable. So we'll set that aside. That is going to have to be a given in how you're going to sell. But people, once they get hooked on something, they want more. And I'm not saying that you have to just crank, you're a machine, but be thinking about that. Okay, I've had success with this book or these 2 books in this series. I want to do this other one, but timing right now is telling me I should keep going with this one. And those are the kind of decisions you have to make. Also, I've found, in the con thing, when I had 2 books to sell, people would walk by the table, give it a glance, and be like, okay. When I had 10 books to sell, different titles, they stopped. There was more interest, whether it's, they seek more legitimacy because you've put out more or whatever, or if it's just there's more shiny stuff on the table now, so, it catches their attention. That's, I did see a definite difference one year to the next with that. But I think a lot of it does go back to being who you are. It does go, like you said, being genuine. Don't try and be the super Twitter marketer or Facebook book launcher if that's not your thing, because it's rarely going to work. Be who you are, and if who you are is just a writer writing, then write. Just dive into that. Be confident in that, and that's going to come out in your book. Like Patrick said, really, honestly, no one in the publishing industry has any clue what makes a bestseller, what makes something take off. It really is the only thing that anyone knows. What really works in this business is word of mouth, and no one has figured out what sparks that first word that spreads. So really, just keep at being who you are, keep at writing, and just put them out there. That's going to be the best thing you do, because, like they say, there's also the overnight successes that have been working at it for 10 years. So you just keep going at it.
Thanks, Jake. So, do you guys have much of an opportunity to interact with the young adult audience? Do you do readings? Do you go to book fairs? What kind of opportunities do you have for that?
Well, if I could jump on that, because this dovetails with what I was going to answer for the previous question. One of the things, like at least for the YA context that we have going here, if I could make a specific suggestion, it would be to contact schools, intermediate schools, that 6th, 7th, 8th grade, and look into maybe speaking at schools and things like that. You get word of mouth if you're providing you're interesting. I mean, if you get up there and you put the kids to sleep, that probably won't work. But if you if you get up there and you get them laughing, you get them you do some entertaining with them. It's it's amazing how many people you can reach doing that. And there's ways to help you facilitate that. I mean, I guess you could put yourself on a listserv as a school speaker. You could reach out through the HWA's library or liaison to contact librarians. But getting out to book fairs, getting out to schools and speaking at schools is a great way to expand your readership. I took my daughter to a book fair at her school just recently, and they had several New York Times bestseller YA authors there, and man, they worked the crowd, and it was unbelievable. You could see the kids just going nuts, and there's really especially if you may not have read it, that kid may not have read it, but when the entire audience is the interest level goes way up. So there's that's a good way to expand word of mouth.
Yeah, it's really a matter of getting out there and doing, meeting people. It's like that Maya Angelou quote, right, where people will forget what you said, they'll forget what you did, but they'll never forget how you made them feel. If you get in front of a crowd, whether it's the crowd is 3 people in a library or 300 people at Comic-Con or whatever it happens to be, if you can get in front of a group of people and they like you, and they're readers, they will be so much more likely to buy your stuff, and they will be so much more likely to talk it up to people after they've done so. There's a lot of ground and pound in getting read, and just going from library to library to library, doing any talks, any readings. If you have free time and you have an opportunity to do something to promote your books in terms of any kind of visit or anything like that, and you're not doing that, then you should be doing that. It's there's a lot of opportunity out there in terms of visiting schools and visiting libraries. A lot of libraries are looking for program all the time, and sometimes you'll get 3 or 4 people who show up, and or even the only people you get are people who happen to be walking by, and that's okay. If you can get a couple of people, then that builds, and it builds, and it builds. If you look at Joe Conrath's early blogs about what he did, he would go to Barnes and Noble, take his books off the shelves, and he'd buy pizza for the booksellers and talk to them and sit in the break room and hang out with them, and that helped them. They got to know him, and they're like, hey, this is a really cool guy. It wasn't even just he's writing cool books, because he was. I mean, his books are fun, but he was making a personal connection, and that's very powerful. And so anytime you have the opportunity to do school talks, library talks, anything like that, it's absolutely worth your time and energy to do it, even if your audience is very small.
All right, thank you, Patrick. So we're about 15 minutes till the end, maybe a little less than that, about 12 minutes. Do any of you have any questions for each other, or any comments you would like to make in the last few minutes?
You scared us.
Oh my gosh. Well, why don't you tell us about projects you're working on now?
Okay, well, I've got a work in progress. It's kind of consuming everything. Um, I'm doing a sequel to my last zombie novel, Plague of the Undead. This one is going to be called The Dead Won't Die. I'm finishing that one up, and I don't know if you know this or not, but there's 900 miles of tunnels underneath the city of El Paso, and they've been developed over the span of several hundred years. Whether it's Native American tunnels, naturally occurring caves, military tunnels from the U.S. military, and then of course drug interdiction things or in drug smuggling tunnels. Anyway, so I'm going to have my novel set in those tunnels, and I'm going to be hopefully a rolling 400-page gunfight. So it ought to be fun.
That sounds awesome.
Wow, that does.
I know for me, I'm currently out on submission with a new YA trilogy that is dealing with a new creature. I was asked a couple years ago to write a short story that had to have a supernatural creature in it, and I decided I didn't want to write a vampire novel. So I asked if I could create my own creature, and they said, sure, go for it. And so I've turned that totally new creature into a trilogy that's currently being marketed. So I have high hopes for that.
Cool. My Bram Stoker Award nominated novel Jade Sky, the sequel comes out in April, and that's the second in a 5-book series. So I'm busy writing book 3 right now. I have another novel I'm hoping to finish this summer that is completely unrelated. Neither of those are YA. Jade Sky are horrifically violent action thrillers. They're basically, imagine a drug that you take it, and the more you take, the more you become like the Incredible Hulk, until eventually you just snap and start killing everything around you. The premise of that is, what do the police, what do the military do about that kind of threat, where this cheap, readily available superhuman power is out there and impossible to control. So that's been a lot of fun, and that's primarily what I'm working on right now, as well as a variety of short stories for different anthologies.
Nice, yeah. I don't have any YA projects planned right now. I'm really actually going to be finishing up about 4 different series for a couple of my publishers throughout this year. Right now I'm working on a standalone novel, which is strange for me because I usually have at least a trilogy or 5 books planned in something. So this one's a little harder because I'm like, gosh, I got to wrap this up. But it's a military space opera, classic kind of military space opera sci-fi of a training station. All these cadets are having to get trained to go out and basically die in the war against the aliens that are coming to take over Earth and all that kind of stuff. So very Heinlein in that kind of vein, but then I've sort of given it an Aaron Sorkin kind of spin to it, where there's a lot of high energy talking and walking in these corridors mixed with crazy intrigue and drama and action and blood that go with that. So it's been a lot of fun to write, but it's a little different than my comfort level has been. So it's moving a little slower than I usually like, but I'm having a blast, and that should hopefully be out in the next couple months as I wrap it up here pretty quick.
Awesome, thanks, Jake. All right, so I'm going to go ahead and wrap us up now. Thank you, Jake Bible. Thanks, Joe McKinney. Thank you, Patrick Freibald. Thank you, Peter Solomon. I'd also like to give a shout out to Tanya Hurley, who was not able to join due to technical difficulties, and John Dixon as well. And congratulations to all the Stoker nominees. You guys are doing awesome. And good luck to all of you, and we'll see what happens at the convention in May. With that, I would like to let everyone know that this video will be available on YouTube afterwards, and if you have additional questions or maybe questions for the folks who didn't get to join, we can continue the thread and the conversation on the YouTube comments. So we look forward to that. So thank you, everyone, and congratulations again. And we will see you all at the convention, and anyone who can join, we'll see you there. And thanks, everyone. Again, these are going to be happening every month. First Tuesday of the month, 4 p.m. Or sorry, first Sunday of the month, 4 p.m.
That was the second.
Sorry, second Sunday of the month, 4 p.m. Let me get it correct for last time. Thank you.
This is the voice of her conscience.
Yes, it's over here next to me now. All right, thank you, everyone. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye.